Almost exactly 1 month after the attack, on October 13th, I returned to New York. My sister and my nephew wanted to go in, so we all took the train in together. And we took the subway to the Brooklyn Bridge and walked out halfway onto the bridge and took photographs. And there's this big hole where you can just see blue sky where the towers once were from the bridge. It was very eerie. This was the strangest trip I'd ever made to New York. The southern tip of the island was dead quiet. There were crowds of people, there was the smell of dust in the air still, and there were police and soldiers all over the place, very much in the same camo pattern like I'm wearing here. At the end of the bridge, police cars were set up. They were checking cars that were coming into the city. There was a big Humvee, a camouflage Humvee, and all these soldiers standing around with these huge machine guns. I mean, it was the weirdest thing. It was like you were suddenly in a police state or something. Battery Park was an armed camp. There were tents and camouflage trucks and hundreds of soldiers all over the place. I mean, it was just like there was a war going on. It was a very, very strange feeling. I mean, it just wasn't the New York that I was familiar with at all. It was like a strange dream, Twilight Zone type experience. Walking towards the site of the disaster, the thing that struck me was that there were so many other buildings in the vicinity that were damaged from the flying debris. When those planes hit the tower, they were going fast enough and they projected so much stuff, glass and steel, out the other side that it struck buildings 2-3 blocks away, had all their windows knocked out, and there was some buildings were all pitted and scarred like they'd been hit with shrapnel. So I was very surprised at how much damage there was to all these other buildings you didn't even hear about on the news. Plus smaller buildings all around had been crushed by all this debris, and there had been fires, and there was a lot more destruction in the immediate area than I had expected to see. I mean, it was like something you would expect in Beirut or something. It was absolutely bizarre. We made our way down to the site. Oh yeah, and this is another thing. Some journalists decided to call the site Ground Zero, which is probably the worst decision in the history of journalism in the last 100 years. I despise the term Ground Zero because it's just inappropriate, it's stupid, it shouldn't be used. Ground Zero is when you drop a nuclear onto a site, like Hiroshima. That's Ground Zero. Any kind of nuclear explosion, the center of where the bomb hits, that's Ground Zero. And to call the World Trade Center that, to me, is just, I don't know, it's wrong, it's idiotic, it almost seems disrespectful in a way. I really hate the way all the journalists just piled onto the bandwagon and said, oh, let's call it that. You know, it's just an awful, awful mistake. I'm not going to call it that. So, anyway, we get to the giant hole in the ground. There was nothing but a huge, huge hole at this point. And I was struck by the fact that just a block away is this ancient, like 250-year-old church that was untouched. I mean, this church is so old, like George Washington had been there, attended services there. This quaint old church, and it has a little cemetery, and it's surrounded by a wrought iron fence. And on that fence, there was just plastered all these pictures of missing people, lost souls. God knows how many of those people were never found. And piles of flowers and tributes and hats and articles of clothing and memorials. Some of it was memorial, some of it were posters, saying, have you seen this person? There are a lot of missing posters and so on. And it was very, very sad. It was a very moving experience. It reminded me of when Princess Diana died in '97. I was in London at that time. I had just flown in just by the weirdest coincidence. And it was a similar experience where everywhere you went there were just mountains and mountains of these flowers piled up at certain places in the city, and just crowds and crowds of people milling around, and little cards and notes written by children, just really heartbreaking stuff like that. I mean, that was the experience. For me, it was like the experience of being in London all over again. And I did do a video of my London trip, and that's also on my channel. But the going to New York and experiencing that just a month after it happened, it was very, very strange, and it was so quiet. The city was never so quiet, and there was no air traffic. The sky, dead silence. Not a single plane in the sky for a couple of weeks, and that also was just eerie. It's as if life had just sort of come to a stop. Just everything halted right in its tracks, and the world just sort of held its breath, not really knowing what to do next or where to go, or even what to think or what to feel. It was a very confusing and very strange time for all of us. But I really think that I think every American should visit the World Trade Center spot at some time in their lives. I think everybody should visit that place. That's like a holy shrine. And I'm glad at least they've got something accomplished for the ceremony that's going to take place tomorrow, even though it's pretty much the two fountains and about half the Freedom Tower has been built. But at least there's something there that you can kind of hang on to. But if you get a chance, I mean, I really suggest, I think everybody sometime in your life, that spot is almost like Mecca for us. It has a real resonance and a meaning, and it'll always be that way. It'll always have that feeling, no matter how much time goes by or no matter what they build in its place. That feeling for everyone who lived through it will never forget it, and will always be connected to that spot at that time in that city. Thank you for watching.